Hello, hello. You have entered into the Urban Suite on a Saturday. I can't believe it. I'm here on a Saturday. My Urbanites, how are you all doing tonight? I am Dr. Lisa LaCON, and welcome into the Urban Suite, you guys. How are you all doing? Listen, tonight I have something special to talk about. I'm talking about Dave Chappelle. I am talking about The Closer, the Dave Chappelle show that he did on Netflix, which to me is, well, you'll get my opinion soon enough. But listen, I need you all to come on in, come on in, come on in, come on in. I know no one is waiting for me to come on a Saturday. I'm not waiting for myself to come on a Saturday because I really didn't think I was going to come on today, but I'm here, I'm live, and you, my Urbanites, are going to get a different perspective, a different, unique perspective on Mr. DC himself. Keyword, Mr. DC himself, Mr. Dave Chappelle. There's no coincidence that his initials are DC because Dave Chappelle and I have a lot in common. A lot in common. And let me tell you, I never met Dave Chappelle personally, but what we have in common, we both grew up in DC around the same time. And let me tell you, I love it. It's no coincidence that his initials are DC. And remember, back in the day, we used to be called the Chocolate City. Well, DC for Dave Chappelle stands for dark chocolate because he's standing there with his dark chocolate self, you know, giving what he knows based on him growing up in DC in the 70s and in the 80s and then, the 90s. Well, we're going to talk about that. But let me tell you, from the start to the end of his show, The Closer, I'm telling you, he tells you what it's about. Even from the theme song, the opening theme song, the instrumental version, let me tell you, it's called Positive Movement. Uh-oh. See, y'all didn't hear that from anybody else except my Urbanites. Y'all, listen, I'm not going to steer you wrong, my Urbanites. The instrumental version of the theme song that he used is called Positive Movement. Listen, Dave Chappelle doesn't use any music haphazardly. Everything is strategic with him. The opening theme song, Positive Movement. So, where are we going with this positive movement? So, let me tell you about Dave Chappelle and myself. Again, I never met Dave Chappelle, but when I say that, I'm talking about growing up in DC during the 70s and the 80s. It was Black excellence at its best. Black excellence at its best growing up in DC during that time frame. And let me tell you why. When I went to school, I had nothing but Black educators. In elementary school, I had a Black principal, Mr. Anderson. Junior high school, I had a Black principal, Mr. Collier. All these are males, Black male school, educators. In high school, because I transferred from Calvin Coolidge, I had Mr. Campbell, Black man, Mr. Campbell. And then when I went to School Without Walls, because I transferred from Calvin Coolidge to School Without Walls, I graduated from School Without Walls on the campus of George Washington University. I had Dr. Barner. Dr. Barner was Dr. Wilma Barner, a female Black educator. How many of you all can say that you all, during from pre-K to 12th grade, had all Black school principals? I'm not talking about VPs, not vice principals. I'm talking about principals. Okay? That's one thing that we had in DC. Another thing that I had the experience of growing up in DC, I had a Black female veterinarian, Dr. Darden. I don't know if she's still alive or not, but I had Dr. Darden. I cannot find a Black veterinarian in Essex County, New Jersey, till this day. And then growing up in DC, I had a Black female veterinarian to take care of my pets. Let me tell you, this is what Dave Chappelle and I experienced growing up in DC. Okay, we had Black city council, we had Black business owners, we had Black club owners, we had Black lawyers, I had Black dentists, I had a Black orthodontist. Everyone that I had was Black except for my pediatrician. I think he was Italian. I can't remember. But everyone else outside of him, Black. Everyone. We had a Black mayor who instituted and implemented summer youth employment program. But guess what? Guess what? Both Dave Chappelle and myself experienced something that happened to DC that I will attribute to the party goers. Now, if you don't know about the party goers and the uninvited, you need to look at my other podcast where I'm talking about the missing white woman syndrome, because I clearly lay it out who are the party goers and who are the uninvited. In DC, we had the uninvited excellence. The party goers didn't like that. So guess what the party goers did? I call it the 3 C's of DC. The first C is crack. They put crack into the neighborhood because guess what? We had too many lawyers. The uninvited had too many doctors. The uninvited had too many educators. The uninvited had too many uninvited excellence along the way. Too many. Oh, no. No. We had the next C was crime. So you have crack. You had crime. Remember in the 80s, DC was considered the murder capital of the world. No. Why was DC considered the murder capital of the world? In my opinion, I will tell you why. Because there was too much uninvited excellence that was transpiring and happening in DC. The party goers, they didn't want that. So because they saw, oh my gosh, these little Black kids are getting summer youth employment jobs. Oh my gosh, contracts are going to Black companies. Oh my goodness, these are Black business owners that are doing things. Oh my goodness, this is a Black female veterinarian taking care of the. No, it was too much for the party goers. So they had to disrupt what was happening. And what was happening was excellence. So it was infiltrated with crack. It was infiltrated with crime. And once you put crack and crime, in my opinion, you breed the avenue for the colonizers to come in. And that's where they are right now in DC. You cannot buy property in Washington, D.C. unless you are making what? $300,000 a year plus. $300,000 a year plus. And the uninvited are now relegated to the projects. The uninvited are now relegated to suburbia, which is becoming awful. The uninvited is now relegated to being nothing because the party goers have taken over. So this is the mindset that myself and Dave Chappelle that we have. We are not going to sell out. Listen to what I'm saying. We're not going to sell out because we experienced firsthand Black excellence in DC growing up in the 70s and then in the 80s until the crack epidemic swooped into DC, okay? And then with that Crime swooped into DC. And then with that, the colonizers swooped into DC. So Mr. DC, Mr. Dave Chappelle, he knows this firsthand. So his opening theme song, Positive Movement, is about that. And then he goes on to say, okay, let's go. Let's go. We getting ready to get started up in here. And then he walks out on stage in this, I don't know if it's leather, but it's a gray steel metallic, not metallic, but a suit. And it looks like he's wearing this suit to deflect the bullets that are going to come his way because of his stance. Because Dave Chappelle is part of the uninvited. So he's wearing his jacket to cloak his heart from those bullets that are going to come his way. Listen, Dave Chappelle is brilliant because Dave Chappelle knows humor and laughter. It allows you to be more relaxed, even when you are delivering harsh messages. So I'm going to look down at my notes. Because, you know, there's a lot of stuff here about this show. So one of the first things he says, he prophesies. He gives a prophecy. This will be my last special for a minute. Now, he's either saying that based on contractual agreement, or he's saying that because he knows he's going to offend a lot of people. And at the end of the day, he could care less. He could care less. He's going to talk about what he wants to talk about on his terms about other people in defense of who he is and what he grew up with and in DC. All right, so he then states, he goes on and states, I'm rich and I'm famous. Okay, code word. I'm rich and I'm famous. And I'm going to go back to that because remember, he left a lot of money on the table. In spite of him leaving all that money on the table, he is rich and he is famous. You know why? Because he stuck with his personal convictions. He's stuck with his personal convictions. A lot of people are rich and famous because they're sellouts. Not him. He's rich and famous and not a sellout. And guess what? He can go to bed at night in peace because he knows that he did not sell out the uninvited. Oh my gosh. So then let's get into it. He's talking about, oh my gosh, okay. Johnson & Johnson, COVID, and the stigma attached to COVID. And that is true. If you tell people that you have COVID, it's like something dirty. Like you did the dirty. I mean, really, it is. It's like, oh, COVID, oh. It's like you might as well put the C on your forehead. I got COVID. Oh, Lord, I don't want to tell nobody. Oh, my gosh. And then he talks about the Johnson & Johnson. Because back in the day, say, for instance, if this would have happened when we grew up in D.C., the Johnson & Johnson would have been available for us. Because that's what, one dose and you're done. Because our people, let me tell you, the uninvited, we may not want to go back for 2 doses. But let me tell you, he talks about that. But then, let me tell you, this part was a little disturbing to me. And no one talked about this ever. Okay, let me hit it. Let me hit it right now. But you all are going to see this.
I felt gross because I've been walking around Texas just touching doorknobs and shit, hands all moist. tipping niggas with cash. Here, take this to your family. I must have killed thousands of people just trying to get tonight's show together. So I hope you appreciate it, because a lot of niggas died for me to get this one off. I hadn't felt that dirty in a long time. Last time I can remember feeling dirty like that, man, I must have been a little boy. I was being molested by a preacher. Molested by a preacher. Oh, don't feel bad for me. I liked it. I used to get a kick out of it.
I couldn't even play the rest. I couldn't play the rest. Did he just confess to everyone that he was molested? I mean, and people are laughing. Like, no commentator that I heard of talked about that. And I had a special where I had Dr. Michelle Morris talking about Black boys being molested. Listen, you want to get what you, oh my God, listen, the Urban Suite, you're going to get far more than any of the gossip channel, gossip, whatever. Did he just say he was molested by a preacher? I'm like, no one is talking about this. What he just said was pretty much hijacked by something else, which that other group of people have the tendency to hijack things from the uninvited, whereas you just totally ignore it. He basically made a confession that he was molested. Now, listen, you can say, well, he's a comedian and he's fine. No. If you were not molested, that wouldn't even be in your forefront. It wouldn't. It would not be in your forefront. But he talks about it. And the thing that I have an issue with is not one commentator that I listened to talked about this. That as a boy, he was molested. Like, oh my God, did he just say that? I couldn't laugh at that. Some people laugh because of his delivery. Some people laugh because they were uncomfortable, like, oh, like that's what they probably did. But I couldn't. I could not laugh at that. But this is persistent in the Black community that we don't talk about. We have to get to a point where we feel comfortable discussing this issue. Because if we don't, what will happen is we end up on drugs. We end up being hypersexual. We end up being abusive. We end up self-medicating. All these issues because there's so much molestation in the Black community. But I'm not here for that tonight, because actually that video did not go over very well. And I think it didn't go over very well because you're just not used to it. Listen, it's Saturday night, so you're going to hear my dog barking and stuff like that. So whatever. Anyway. So then he goes on, Dave Chappelle, talking about COVID and him having the virus and how this Johnson & Johnson vaccination, basically it worked because he had no symptoms. But then he says something interesting about his immune system in his body. Now, Dave Chappelle is married to an Asian woman. So that's why he's like, when he was quarantined, he was watching Black people beat up on Asians. Now, I don't know how many videos he saw. The only time I saw a lot of Black people beating up on Asians is Jim Kelly during the Bruce Lee days. I don't know how many videos he saw, but he is married to an Asian. So I get the sensitivity of that. But then he goes on to say the Black immune system was beating, like, was it God forget, but the China virus? Like, was it? I don't know what he was saying. I'm like, oh my gosh. So now he's talking about like in a subtle way. Oh my gosh, he's talking in a subtle way about like coronavirus being from Asia and China virus. He didn't say it, but I love his subliminal tones, his subliminal messages. Whereas you interpret it how you want to interpret it. You have to interpret it how you want to interpret it. So he talked about that. And then he went on to talk about how things can get, not mixed up or so, but basically he said space Jews. I'm like, oh Lord, my God, oh my God. Oh, and then he says to us, after he does the story of why he calls them space Jews, the story space Jews, he actually tells us it's going to get worse than that. It's going to get worse than that. So at that point in time when he says it's going to get worse than that, it's time for you to tune out, because at this point, he done talked about, seriously, within the 5 minutes, he talked about him being molested. He talked about coronavirus. He talked about Jewish people, and he talked about the Johnson and Johnson. I mean, this was in the first 5 minutes. I'm like, oh snap! Remember the opening theme music? Positive movement. I'm like, oh, where the heck is he going? He said it's going to get worse than that. He's giving you a fair warning. He's saying, guess what? You don't have to look at Netflix. You're not mandated to look at this. If you want to experience more of this and worse of this, continue watching. But now here's your chance to drop off. Here's your chance. Fair warning. Here is your chance to drop off. All right. So then, he speaks of the book, about him writing a book. And it's about a big, black, burly man that has a very neutral sounding name, as well as a neutral sounding voice, who at the end of the day always gets shot by the cops, always in his story. And he says the book is Clifford. What does he call it? Clifford, the Big Black Ninja. I said, Lord, my God, Clifford, the Big Black Ninja. Now, I used to watch Clifford, the Big Red Dog with my kids. So that's a play on Clifford, the Big Red Dog. But now this Clifford, the Big Black Ninja. And at the end of the day, when he says that Clifford takes on these bullets and it doesn't really hurt, it just breaks his heart. Dave Chappelle, in fact, is Clifford. I mean, listen, the bullets, what did I tell you about his outfit that he had on to deflect bullets? The bullets that he was taking, he can withstand it, because I know his upbringing is similar to mine. He can withstand it, but it does break his, and you can tell. The one thing I noticed about Dave Chappelle, because I look at people, I look at their eyes, he is a person that you can tell when he's telling the truth, or you can tell when he's telling a lie, because his eyes say so much. His eyes are very telling, very telling. So let me tell you, let's see what else. All right. So his objective that he said for this special is to complete his body of work and answer some questions. Because remember, at the very beginning, he said, this is going to be my last special for a minute. So he's answering some questions. Now, you remember Sticks and Stones, where he talked about the alphabet people. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're talking about the alphabet people. And who was in the driver's seat of the alphabet people? A party goer. Oh, It was a party goer who was in the driver's seat of the alphabet people. Okay. So basically, some of the questions, number one, the LGBTQ plus community. He wants to address this community. So he hopes to, talk about this. And then he goes on to the baby. Oh my God. Now listen, y'all know, the people that know me know I like the baby. I like the baby. So he goes on to say, because this made big news about the baby, that he hopes to negotiate the release of the baby because it was that community, the LGBTQ plus community, that put the baby in jail. Now, what Dave Chappelle is saying is this: the baby actually killed a man in self-defense, but no one cared about that. No one cared about it at all. His career, as a matter of fact, skyrocketed. The trajectory of his career went to the highest point and peak. And the baby even confesses that in his song Rockstar, that he killed a man and basically he would do it again. Now, this is songs that, BET, they played the video with the baby. And I have the lyrics of the baby, the rock star, that he said, I would do it again. So you should not be shy or clueless that the baby killed someone, because basically the baby confessed in his song Rockstar that he did kill someone. And guess what? He would do it again to protect his family. And that's what he said. So Dave Chappelle said, basically, Mr. DC said, you know what? The baby, they play his songs on BET, no longer owned by the uninvited. They play his song and video on BET during their special. But when he comes and does a concert and he talks about someone and your feelings are hurt, you abort him. Oh, Lord. That's what he's talking about. Your feelings are more important than the life of someone that was taken, regardless if it was self-defense or not. You could have cared less, party goers, if the baby killed someone, unless they were one of your own. And this is what Dave Chappelle is talking about. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about, you know what? Why don't you free the baby? Yes, he did hurt your feelings, but you need to free him because that's all he did. Oh my God. Oh my goodness. Woo! So then he talks about the disparity. He asks a question, and it's very rhetorical. This is the foundation of his show. He said, is it possible that a gay person can be racist? That's the basis of his show. Is it possible that a gay person can be racist? That's rhetorical because he knows the answer. Just because you are gay does not mean that you cannot be racist. Now, let me tell you about racism. The uninvited or Black people cannot be racist. And let me educate you all about that. Racism is simply prejudice plus power. You have to be prejudiced against someone and have the power to stop them from doing certain things. As Blacks, what power do we have? What the heck do we own to control things, to say, oh, no, you can't do this? No, we can be prejudiced, but we don't have the power. And the power comes with wealth. The power comes with wealth. If you don't have the power plus the prejudice, that's all you're going to be. Prejudice. But if you have if you're prejudice plus the power, then you are considered a racist because it's a system. It's systematic. You don't have power to do anything. As Blacks, we don't control car companies. As Blacks, we don't control the media. As Blacks, we don't control banking institutions. As Blacks, we don't control higher education. And then this new administration wants to cut it from 40 something billion to $2 billion. We don't control anything. So how can we really have the power to dictate change? The only thing we have the power to do is march and sing, "We Shall Overcome." I'm sorry. So he asks that question. And then he says, well, of course, I know that they can be. So then basically he's comparing the gay progress with the Black progress. How long have we been here for? And striving to get certain things in life. See, he's talking about the gay progress versus the Black progress, right? He's going back to his childhood. That's where he's digging from. Because at the end of the day, that's his love of people, his love for his people. And he's saying, just because I love my people, I'm not hating on your people, but your people have hijacked and used what my people have in order to get what you need. But at the end of the day, you can flip it. You can flip it. So then he goes on to talk about Blacks need to get with the gay agenda in order to get off the plantation. That's what he's saying. Basically, in a nutshell, if we Blacks need to get off the plantation, this is what he's saying, we need to get with the gay agenda. Little Nas X. Oh my God. I mean, that's what he's saying. That's what he's saying. He's saying in order for Blacks need to get with the gay agenda in order to get off the plantation. And then he talked about Martin Luther King, talking about, hey, you wear the little things. That's what he's saying. I got to take a little sippy sip. And then he goes on to talk about Stonewall history here in Manhattan, in New York, how that agenda dealing with the gays, they were like, yes, we're fighting. Yes. They weren't like, oh my gosh, you hurt my feelings. No. This is the generation, in my opinion, where everybody receives a trophy. And it happens across the board. So whether you win or lose, you got a trophy. When we grew up, you didn't get a trophy if you lost. You got a pat on the back. All right, maybe next time. And that's it. You didn't get a trophy. Now, everybody gets a trophy. So now everyone is like, oh, he's talking about me. Let's cancel him. Oh my gosh. Like, no. All right, so he says something, and I'm going to give a quote from what he said. This is not what Dr. Lisa said. Here's a quote by what he said. Let me get it. Gay people are minorities until they need to be white again. Oh my God. What did you? He said gay people are minorities until they need to be white again. Party goers. I can clutch my pearls, clutch my scarf. Like, oh my gosh, this is what he says. And that's his heart. He said gay people are minorities until they need to be white again. Oh, is there a lie in that? Let me ask you. I don't know how many non-blacks are watching, but would you want to trade your skin color for mine? Would you want to trade your skin color for mine? It's either a yes or no. Because the Bible says, let your yes be yes or your no be no, and anything else comes from the evil one. Just be honest. And this is what he's saying, that gay people are minorities until they need to be white again. So what did they do? They hijacked the civil rights movement, hijacked it, and said, oh my gosh, I'm a minority based on who I sleep with. I'm a minority based on who I love. That's what they're saying. And then he goes on to talk about the white feminist movement. Oh, like I said, it was heavy. Listen, he told you it's going to get worse. That's your time to turn it off or to deal with it. He talks about the white feminist movement because the white feminist movement, I couldn't join the white feminist movement. That's not my opinion. That's historical. I, in my complexion, with my natural short hair, could not join the white feminist movement. They didn't want me. I wasn't invited because I'm the uninvited. I wasn't invited. So then he talks about Sojourner Truth. And he says how she wanted to claw her way into the partygoers movement. And they wouldn't accept her. And she said, ain't I a woman? Ain't I a woman? Well, yes, you are, but you are an uninvited woman, and they don't want to deal with you. Listen, this is what's happening in America. It is what it is. This is the history of America. They didn't want me, someone that looked like me, in their movement. And this is what Mr. DC, Mr. Dave Chappelle, is talking about. Oh, my goodness. And then, listen. And then he segues into him leaving $50 million on the table or in the bus. And where did he go? He went to Africa. Yes! What? He left $50 million on the bus. How many of you all would have left $50 million on the bus for the love of your people? Now, I'm like, oh, Lord, 50 million. Oh, shucks now. Wait, 50. He left 50 million. He's not a sellout. He cannot be bought. He left $50 million on the bus. And this is what he said. I'll tell you who I am, because he talked about this little white woman following him. And he says, let me tell you who I am. Not who you think I am, but I'm going to tell you who I am. I left $50 million on the bus and I walked. God, ooh. Woo! He left $50 million on the bus. Would you leave $50 million on the bus? Because let me tell you, if you would have taken that $50 million, he wouldn't be able to do a show like this. Because again, the Bible says, for the love of money is the root of all evil. He loves his people more than his money. Oh my gosh. I need 50 million. Kudos. Listen, Mrs. Chappelle, God bless you. Because I know if my husband was saying that I'm not taking this $50 million deal. I may have been a little, oh, but at the end of the day, he has his convictions. At the end of the day, he grew up in DC with Black excellence, reading Black authors, being surrounded by Black poetry, being surrounded by Black lawyers, being surrounded by Black doctors, being surrounded by Black educators. That's who Mr. DC is, Mr. Dave Chappelle. DC through and through, growing up in that era until the 3 C's came in: crack, crime, and colonization. Woo! And this is the one thing, let me tell you, even though I went to Hampton, there's no way I could have gone to Howard because it was too close to me. But I attribute all of that Black excellence, at least the majority of the Black excellence, I attribute it to Howard University. Those students became something. Those students, they had a medical school. Those students had a law school. Those students they were majoring in education, and they stayed in DC because they cared. People didn't like that. They couldn't pull a Oklahoma and bomb DC because why? The president is there. It's the nation's capital. Listen to what I'm saying. It's the nation's capital. So you can't bomb it. I mean, you can't. But you can inject crack. You can inject crime. And then that opens the way to the colonizers. And this is what Dave Chappelle, I call him Mr. DC, this is what we experienced and saw growing up in DC. And then he talks about the transgender population. He says, he goes into the story about Daphne. Now, let me tell you, as a counselor, as he was talking about this story, I knew that Daphne was not at peace. There have been a lot of studies that show just because your shell is different, listen to what I'm saying, your shell, your outward appearance is different with the same internal DNA, you still will not have peace. That's what studies show. So as Dave Chappelle was talking about his transgender friend, Daphne, I got an unction in my spirit. I said, not happy. This person is not happy at all. Not at all. So as he talked about Daphne, and it was very sad. It was very sad because when Daphne said, I'm talking about the human experience, it was clear to me that Daphne was not satisfied with her life, no matter who she looked like or what she looked like. And then he says Daphne committed suicide by jumping off the building. And he said something key. Let me fill up right here. He said something key. He said, now I'm talking about DNA. I'm not talking about the shell. And this is true. This is not my opinion. This is based on studies. Most women who commit suicide is done by poison, pills. Okay. Men have a tendency to be more violent. Unfortunately, they have a tendency to hang themselves, shoot themselves, or do what Daphne did, jump off a building. And that's when he said, well, regardless of her outer appearance, her DNA was still based on the male composition. Oh, it was brilliant. And then he says, when he got in contact with the daughter. Listen to what he said. This is powerful. Powerful. He said, I knew your father. I knew your father. And he was a wonderful woman. Oh, I knew your father. And he was a wonderful woman. Like that. Because he clearly said, only a man would take their life like that. Based on research, he is correct. Again, most women use pills, overdose on purpose. That's according to research. So that's what he said. I knew your father, and he was a wonderful woman. And then he says, this is the nutshell. Empathy. Empathy must go both ways. He's speaking directly to the LGBTQ plus community. Empathy must go both ways. What have you done for our cause except hijack it? What have you done for our cause except try to have people transform to your cause? What have you done to our cause? Have you been vocal about reduction of funds for HBCUs? Have you been vocal about Black on Black crime, LGBTQ plus community, unless it affects your own? Have you been vocal? So what he's saying is we have to be so sensitive to your plight, but are you sensitive to ours? And our plight is still going on. Have you been sensitive to our plight? And then he says, he talks about what Daphne said about the punchlines and things of that nature. And then he says this, will you stop punching down on my people? Will you stop punching down on my people? Because growing up, I saw Black excellence. Growing up, I was in the midst of Black excellence. That's who I love. And I left $50 million on the bus. I left $50 million on the table for the love of my people. What have you done for my people? What have you done? What have you done for the Black community? LGBTQ plus. And that's all he's saying. That's all he's saying. And then he said, don't abort the baby. Listen, if you were so concerned basically about our community, you would have been concerned about the baby initially killing a man, even though it was in self-defense. You would have had at least an inkling to understand and to know, okay, what happened? Did you want to know? Absolutely. Did you care to know? Absolutely not. And this is where Mr. DC, Mr. Dave Chappelle, this is what he's talking about. So, listen, at the end of his show, what song did he play? At the end, his end song was, I Will Survive. I will survive. That wasn't done by accident. We may not see Dave Chappelle for a couple of months. We may not see Dave Chappelle for a couple of years. He's going to go to his Ohio farm with all of his hundreds of acres because he was raised partially in Ohio. So that's his community. That's what he's used to. And at the end of the day, Dave Chappelle is going to be all right. At the end of the day, he left $50 million in the bus on the table for the love of his people. And hey, he will survive, just like his end song theme, I Will Survive. Remember, the intro song was Positive Movement. And then this outro song was I Will Survive. That was not by coincidence. So listen, you have heard it from the Urban Suite. This is something different probably that you've heard about this special. I know I'm a little late, but I was very busy. But I hope you take this in. I hope you enjoyed it. And let's see, I have 2 comments. Let's see. Oh, Mr. Bath Fountain from Jamaica, my Jamaican. Yes. Listen, you know why I love the Jamaicans? Because their spirit. They don't have the we shall overcome. No, they don't have that we shall overcome spirit. They were like, you getting the heck out of this country. You getting the heck out of here and we taking over. I love the spirit. That's why I love Jamaica. You know why I love Jamaica? Because it reminds me of DC growing up. You have the Black educators, you have the Black doctors, you have the Black lawyers. That's what I know. That's what I gravitate toward. That's what I know. And I have to say, when I came to this area, New York, I'm like, I'm the only Black in the room? I can't believe it. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it was just new to my system. I grew up in the chocolate city, and then I went to an HBCU, a historically Black college and university. And then after that, I'm thrown into, this multicultural world, whereas I don't see much Black excellence. I don't. I don't see it like I saw it in DC. I don't. I don't see it. It's amazing to me. When I speak with people in New York, I'm like, you didn't grow up with a Black high school principal? You didn't grow up with a Black male science teacher? You didn't grow up with a Black male gym teacher? You didn't grow up with a Black male art teacher? I'm like, that was normal. That was normal. But people didn't like that. The party goers didn't like that. So they introduced crack. They introduced crime. And then the colonizers came on in. That's what happened to DC. And now it's no longer the chocolate city. It's sort of like Oklahoma. But it couldn't be bombed because you have the presidents that are there. You have senators that are there. It's the nation's capital. So they had to do something. And then they promoted as the drug capital of the world. And then they set up the mayor, in my opinion. They set him up, who was providing home ownership for Blacks, who was providing jobs for Black youth. Hello, I'm one of them. And guess what? As a result of that job, I am now Dr. Lisa LaCON. People don't want that. They don't want that. It established my work ethic. It established who I am. In my opinion, he was one of the greatest mayors that we had, Marion Barry, in my opinion. And they set the man up. And the woman they used to set him up, in my opinion, got paid handsomely for that. May she, this bug flying around. Oh. May she, I don't know where she is or what she's doing, but I'm telling you, the progression of DC and where it was going, they didn't like it. Nope, no chocolate city unless they were chocolate city drug addicts, unless it was chocolate city gangs, unless it was chocolate city, maladaptive behaviors. And that's why I love Jamaica. I love seeing people that look like me on billboards. People that look like me when I go into, meetings. People that look like me. And that's where Dave Chappelle is coming from. And that's his why. Why would he do a special like that? Because that's why. He loves his people more than money. So anyway, I'm out. Peace. I will see you Tuesday, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, here live, YouTube, Facebook. Thank you, Marvis Brown. I don't know if your students still tuning in. And Bath Fountain. We're going to try to still go back to Jamaica because I love the spirit of the Jamaicans. They were like, nope, you got to go. You got to get out. You got to get out. I love it. I love it. Until next time. Oh, man, this has been something else. So let's see. Yes. So until next time, Dr. Lisa LaCON checking out. Bye.